every weekday afternoon, noon to 2 Eastern, on ESPN News, ESPN Radio, soon to be moving to ESPN Plus. And obviously there at the end, you may have also heard another voice that gave Greeny some clarity. That was ESPN NFL insider Dan Graziano. So let's sort of run through everything that happened. You might recall the NFL trade deadline was over yesterday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Our Adam Schefter actually reported you might have wanted to get trades done late last week because everybody's got to go through COVID testing protocol. You want to acquire a guy that can help and play for you right away. So here's sort of the timeline as we get into Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, but it's not that straight. It's actually a little complicated. There's a bunch of things going on. Let's start with our ESPN NFL insider, Diana Russini. She reported Green Bay discussed trading for the Texans' Will Fuller. However, there was a disagreement in Green Bay at the highest levels of the Packer organization over whether or not adding an elite receiver in the short term would be worth the spend. You got to remember, Green Bay's been banged up at the wide receiver position all season long, and Aaron Rodgers has been begging for help at that position the last couple of years. Aaron Rodgers has not been holding back his thoughts since the selection of Jordan Love, so he essentially said this. He wanted to have a little plausible deniability. Quote, Rodgers, I'm not going to get into those conversations. Again, I'm just going to reiterate what I said and continue to say that I clearly understand my role and my place on this team, and that's my focus. Taking the politically correct stance, which is an apropos point on this Wednesday morning for sure. Back to Dan Graziano, who said the Packers have a plan, and that plan doesn't include trading for guys at the deadline.
They run their organization a certain way. It is draft and develop. It is very unusual. I mean, look, the free agency they did a couple of years ago, bringing in Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith and Adrian Amos. I mean, that was a really unusual flurry of free agent activity for a team that is almost always composed of players that it drafted. There was a study done a couple of years ago, like the most players or the fewest players on a roster that they have ever played for a different organization, and the Packers were far and away had the fewest. It was like one or two. So that's how they like to do it.
That's not really a surprise. Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise. Key, of course, you've been following the NFL for decades. That was the exact plan under their old great GM, Ron Wolf, and the plan under this current guy, Brian Gutekunst, who is their general manager at this particular point. They make their hay in April. They don't make it at the trade deadline in the fall. It's always been the case, and Graz just backed it up.
No, it's Ron. You mentioned Ron Wolf. I was going to actually get into that. If you go all the way back to Ron Wolf, yeah, they brought in Reggie White in free agency, but that was to establish the Green Bay Packers as a organization that was real and wanted to win championships, and that was then. I think when you look at it, though, and you talk about getting Aaron Rodgers help, they didn't do it in the draft last year, Z, because they felt that they had some young receivers that they were developing that they got either through free agency, undrafted free agency, or through the draft and draft capital. So when you look at them going out and getting Will Fuller, which is Will Fuller's playing okay, decent so far, halfway mark to 1,000 in 7 games. I think when you look at him, he's got 5 touchdowns on the season. But what was the Texans asking for? What was the price? You know, you figure it had to be high for them to move on. And I think when you're looking at where they're at as an organization, Will Fuller wouldn't put them over the top to get to a championship. He's not that type of wide receiver. If you're talking about an alpha dog that they would have to go out there and get, mind you, he's a rental. This is not the NBA. This is the NFL. When you decide to bring a guy in and give up, let's call it a second-round pick for Will Fuller.
Okay.
You're now getting a guy on an expiring contract at the end, and he wants to get new money. So now you extend him new money. You have another wide receiver who's been there that you drafted in the second round, Devontae Adams, who certainly needs to be paid in the top-tier wide receivers in the National Football League. So if you're giving Will Fuller $13, $14, $15, $16 million a year, well, what you think Devontae Adams is going to need 7 months later? So you got to factor all those into it when you're making a decision like this for a player that you think could help you, but ultimately, does he push you over the top? Is that what you're missing to get to the Super Bowl? Or are you missing an elite wide receiver, even though you have Devontae Adams? Or are you just missing the guys like a Lazar who got hurt?
I just vehemently disagree with you, Key. The number here that I think is very important that everybody's missing out on is 36. Aaron Rodgers is 36 years old. He's playing at an MVP caliber level right now. How long does that window stay open for him? It doesn't feel like the front office is setting up Aaron Rodgers for championship success. Now, they have issues on the defensive side of the ball. I understand that. I watched the Vikings game. I saw Dalvin Cook run for 4 touchdowns. I saw the Vikings only throw for 14 passes. I hear all that. But at the end of the day, if Davante Adams is the main target, I do whatever I need to do to surround him with as many pieces as possible, even if it is short-term thinking, in order for him to win a Super Bowl. I much rather have the problem on the back end saying, how do we figure all this out after we're hosting the Lombardi Trophy?
So you take Will Fuller, for instance, and you give up a second-round pick for Will Fuller, a guy with a history of injuries.
But Key, you sat here and told me about how good Will Fuller was at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, but not for a second-round pick. A guy with a history of injuries, you're now going to bring him in not really knowing if he can stay healthy, on top of he's going to want a new contract for 6 months, or not even 6 months, 2.5 months of service, hoping that he's the guy that gets you over the top to get to an NFC championship game or a Super Bowl.
A rental player.
And if he doesn't get there, you've now given up, you surrendered a second-round pick. Second-round picks are Pro Bowl, borderline, long-term, valuable pieces. This is, again, you don't just give that away. You don't give that away.
So here are some of the second-round picks that they have had over the last couple of years. Davante Adams, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Greg Jennings. So I hear your point to a degree.
All drafted by them.
I hear you.
Developed by them.
Long-term thinking. How much long-term thinking can you have with a quarterback who's 36, about to turn 37 years old? How much longer can he play at an MVP caliber level?
He ain't showing no signs of slowing down. Not one bit.
That's the thing, because he publicly said, I'm ready to play into my 40s. That
Easy.
would be another 4 years.
Easy.
Brady is 43, and if he's using Brady as the model, it could be much more than that.
Easy. But it's very easy to see. It's not hard. I'm not giving up high draft capital for a rental. I'm just not doing it. When you look at it, you look at the guys that are being moved around during the draft. I mean, not during the draft, during this time period, the guys that are being moved around. You look at Yannick Ngakoue.
I love hearing you say
well
that name.
done.
Nothing. You got nothing for him. Here you go. Here's a body. You look at Carlos
Dunlap.
Almost call it Carlos Dansby. Carlos Dunlap. Nothing. So that's what you get. You get the reason Gilmore couldn't move from the New England Patriots is because the New England Patriots said, we need a first-round pick. We need a first-round pick. Everybody's like, no, we'll give you a third because his deal is up in 1 year.
But Key, you don't make any moves? Zero moves, you're saying right now, with the way our personnel is defined and structured, we think we have a shot at winning the Super Bowl.
What am I getting? I'm not just taking players to be taking them.
Give me something if I'm Aaron Rodgers. Give me something.
I'm not taking players just to be taking them. If you're telling me I can have Julio Jones, I'll give you a second-round pick. I might give you 2. I might give you 2 twos. But that's a different animal.
Fair enough. We should mention more Pats talk coming up at 6:40 with our Pats Insider. There's a lot to get into, including the moves they didn't make, the moves they